What's up, guys? Welcome back to Inside Out Precision. Today we're going to be looking at how to shoot a hinge. So everything from this is really going to be geared towards new shooters, or maybe you've been shooting it for a little while but you're not really feeling like you're getting the accuracy and the clean break that you're supposed to with a hinge. So this is really going to be geared towards kind of beginning to novice / intermediate shooters. So everything from how to draw and not punch yourself in the face to how to actually get that release to activate correctly and fire. So there's a lot of different hinges out there on the market. And by a hinge, if you're not familiar with what that is, it means it is a release that literally hinges right where the, this little hook here connects to the string. There's a hook and a moon in there. When it gets to a certain point after rotating, it just fires. A lot of people use these to get over target panic, but if you don't learn how to shoot them the right way from the beginning, it might be better for like the first week, but target panic is gonna creep its way back, and a poor shot with a hinge is about the worst shot there is in archery. So for today's lesson, I'm gonna kind of use, this is the Sweet Spot Pro from TrueBall, and what's unique about this hinge is it actually has a safety on it. So when that safety is engaged, I can rotate this any which way and it will not fire. Once I get to full draw, no matter where the starting position of that handle is, I click off the safety and it's going to travel the same amount before firing. So if you're a new shooter, this is an awesome release. There's a bunch of different sweet spots. This one can go between 3 and 4 finger, and it's got a lot of adjustment for hot or slow or whatever. But first we're going to go over kind of how to draw the bow with a hinge so you don't punch yourself in the face. Now, if you have a release like this, you can draw, with pressure on all the fingers, whatever, it's not going to matter. But most releases do not have a safety. If that is the case, when you go to draw your bow, most of that pressure needs to be on your index and maybe a little bit on your middle finger, and most of your releases are going to have this thumb peg here. So when you draw, you got to remember, if this rotates too far, it's going to fire. So when you draw, you need tension in your index finger, very little in your middle and your ring finger, and peg your thumb around that peg, so that even if you start to get too much pressure on those your middle and index finger, it's harder for that release to rotate. So when you draw, you're gonna draw back with it pegged. You're gonna come into your anchor point here, and once you're in there, now you're ready to start essentially pulling. Now, this is where the myth of expanding through the shoulder blades comes in. You have to have back tension in order to shoot a release, or a hinge release. Now, when I say back tension, I mean that when I get to full draw and I settle in there, it's like a push-pull basically. I'm loading my back. So if you're gonna exaggerate this, I hit full draw, and then this shoulder and this elbow kind of come up and back up behind my ear. And when you do that, you should feel kind of like your trap, your rhomboid, and your lat engage in your back there. Now, once I have my back loaded, I cannot physically expand anymore. So when you hear people say, squeeze your shoulder blades together until the release fires, well, you can't really do that because there's draw stops on a compound bow. It's not a recurve. I can't pull that bow apart any further. You can't necessarily expand. What you can do is build that pressure. So I use the analogy of, like, if I had my arms braced between two walls like this, I can't push the walls further apart, but I can build even pressure on both sides and push harder against that wall. It's the same concept when shooting a hinge. So if you imagine when you get to full draw, you come in, boom, that hand anchors in the face. As soon as I get into that anchor point, I'm gonna start building that back tension. And if you imagine, so this is actually a good example on this. This is the Spitfire from War Torn Archery. It's an awesome shot trainer. But if you imagine there was a knot, a loose knot in the middle of this cord, I wanna tighten that knot right in the middle of that cord. So if all I do is push, if it's only forward pressure, that knot's gonna move down the cord this way. Conversely, if all I do is pull, it's gonna move down the rope backwards. If I push and pull evenly, if I get an even brace or an even load forward and backward, that knot is gonna tighten right in the middle. So The first thing is gonna be getting that back tension. And I use that same back tension for any style that I'm gonna shoot, whether it's a hinge or a thumb button or an index style. I always start by getting that push-pull into my, loading my back and getting into that back wall. Now this is where there's a lot of different kind of methods or theories on how to get this to fire. The most obvious would be, and I'm not gonna say that any one of these is right or wrong, because you might wanna try all of these. I'll tell you how I do it at the end here. The most common that I see people wanna do is they wanna physically do this with their hands. So they're literally like pulling that finger. They're contracting that finger until it fires. And that can totally work. For me, what happens is when I start to try to tense my hand, it starts pulling me around on target a little bit. The other method is some people literally just, they say just pull. Just keep pulling, building that pressure, which is a part of the shot. But here's where it gets tricky. If I have a tense hand, meaning, my fingers are not soft, if my palm and hand is tense, I can pull all I want, but unless that release actually starts to manipulate and turn, it's never gonna fire. You're just gonna sit there pulling, and then you're gonna start shaking and your shot's gonna break down, and that's gonna be the end of it. So what I personally do, and what I've had a lot of success in coaching with, is I think about a really soft palm and soft fingers on my release hand. So I like to hold that release just right in this row of knuckles here. So the back of that release is butted up kind of right against those knuckles. And then you want to try to keep the back of your hand flat and just hook it like this. So imagine if you were carrying like a 5-gallon bucket full of water. If you're hanging it like this, the back of your hand is extended, you're just hanging on by your fingers. Or you can imagine, what if you were hanging by like a monkey bar on a playground by just your fingers? Your palm and the back of your hand are gonna be fairly extended, and you're just hooking it with your fingers. When you get that hand position, use my shot trainer here, I'm gonna kind of zoom in on this and kind of exaggerate this. So I draw, most of the tension is on these front fingers. I come in and I anchor, I relax. So maybe when I draw, I'm here. I then relax through there. These fingers just hang naturally. Now, as I build that pressure, I start thinking about literally relaxing through my palm and taking tension out of my index finger. As I do that, and this is gonna be exaggerated, but as I take tension out of that index finger, you can see that release, my back tension, that backward pressure, and that my elbow and my back being, loaded back behind my ear there. As I take that tension out, it transfers to my ring or my middle and my ring finger. And then because I have that back tension, my elbow essentially picks up that slack, and so I stay in that back wall. And I think that's the pulling through the shot that a lot of people are trying to describe when they're talking about, pulling through a shot and expanding. I'm not physically moving the draw stops at all, but there is gonna be, that elbow is gonna pick up the slack as my ring or my middle and my ring finger move backwards. So again, I'm gonna kind of zoom in on that. So boom, I draw, thumb is pegged, I let go of it, and then as I keep that tension there, even push pull, as I start to relax that middle finger, it just naturally, relax my pointer finger, it just naturally starts to rotate, and boom, the shot will fire. Now for me personally, I hold best on target, and I seem to have better shot timing when I'm relaxed. And one thing that I really had trouble with when I started shooting a hinge was, probably 1 out of 3 or 4 shots actually broke the way I wanted it to. The other ones I would be pulling, but I would be tense here because I was pulling. My hand would be too tense. So again, I would start pulling, but there would be no rotation of the release, and it'd be just so close to firing. So then I'd just kind of finish it on my own. And the problem with the hinge is that if it is not a clean shot, if it's not fired the way it's designed to be fired, meaning a surprise release or a non-commanded shot, the result is far worse than if I just punch a trigger or, you know, get a little punchy on a thumb button, because I'm literally rotating and pulling this whole hand. So when I command the hinge, I essentially just pull my front arm all around. So that's how I personally like to shoot one. Now, if you're brand new to this, I would highly suggest just doing this on a blank bail. Don't just especially if you're trying to get over target panic. Target panic there's a lot of catalysts for it, okay? But usually it's, you know, people have an issue where as soon as that pin hits the white, they just want it to go. That's not gonna go away with a hinge. I see so many people that I start shooting with where they, you know, with a hinge where they come down and you see that pin drop, and they just go, donk, and it goes off. It's like this, you know, triple take before it goes off. So blank bail with it, focus on just rolling through that shot until the shot fires, and get that, you have to consciously practice it in order to really create that muscle memory, and it's gonna take a little while. Now, if you're someone who doesn't struggle with target panic, if you can sit there and aim with your finger on the trigger and not feel like you have to just rip the shot off as soon as the pin hits the target, then you may be able to pick one up, play around with the travel a little bit, and get one, you know, to start hitting for you right away. Everybody's gonna be different on that. But like I said, generally speaking, I like to introduce people to it on a blank bail and have them shoot it like that for 3, 4, 5, 6 lessons before we introduce a target. So again, we're gonna kind of go bottom to top here. So when I draw, you're gonna have your thumb on the peg. Most of the tension is in my pointer finger, a little bit in my middle, and pretty much none. It's positioned on the handle, but I'm not applying any pressure with my ring finger. So I'm gonna draw with it pegged. Boom, and I'm gonna actually take the safety off on this one. I'm gonna get real close so you can see. So now I'm pulling into that back wall. I start to relax, and poof, the shot fires. Now, you can play with the amount of travel it takes for it to fire, meaning, you know, I can get it to where just as soon as I start to go here, it fires, or I can set it to where, you know, it might have to come all the way past vertical to fire. It's totally gonna depend on the person. Now, if you have target panic and that's what you're trying to get over, lots of people would think, oh, well, I need it to fire sooner. Wrong. Slow it down. Slow it down and pull. Practice with it so slow that you have to pull way past where you'd ever really want it to fire. And then when you start getting that down, speed it up a little bit, and those shots are gonna break so clean. So I'm gonna go set the camera up where I'm actually just gonna shoot a few. You're gonna notice I have a little different one. This is actually the hinge from UltraView, and it's a little bit different in the sense that it has so a lot of releases that don't have the safety are gonna have a click, meaning you get to a certain point and you'll hear this, it's kind of hard with this, but you'll hear this little click. That tells me that release is just so close to firing. So for me with this release, I draw back, and I actually don't need a thumb peg on this. The way this release is designed, you can easily draw it without a thumb peg. But I get in pretty much as soon as I anchor and start to settle in, it clicks. And then I pretty much just think about keeping soft fingers, you know, building that back tension, and boom, the shot just fires. So I'm gonna just set the camera up, shoot a few with this, try to keep the camera up close. You're gonna have a tough time actually seeing the release move because we're talking, I mean, just fractions of an inch here. But hopefully you can get an idea of what it's gonna look like. So be right back. All right, so out here on the range, and one other thing I wanna cover before I get into this is where I'm anchoring and kind of the angle of your hand. So I generally anchor like right where my jaw turns down, right under my ear right there. That goes right between my index and my middle knuckle. Like boom, right there. You can kind of feel that crease in your jaw, or excuse me, that crease between these two fingers right on your jawline there. And I always just say, match kind of the natural angle of your cheek and your jawline with your hand. Now, everybody's gonna you'll see some people that shoot really, really flat. For example, with my old black hole, my Scott black hole release, it had a full capture like circle here that your thumb went through. And when I tried to get it vertical, that metal piece would just hit my jaw and it was really uncomfortable. So I shot it a little bit flatter and really just had this finger right along my jawline there. So some people, they shoot real vertical. I'm not here to tell you which is right or wrong. Whatever is easiest for you to activate, which you can get more leverage with, is what you want to do. But once you figure out what's comfortable, keep it consistent. Because if I'm changing the angle of my hand shot to shot, I'm essentially changing the starting position of my string loop. So I'm going to get these wild left and right shots and not understand why. So you'll kind of see that here. I would say I have a slightly flatter than average angle of my hand, but for me, just the way I'm built, when I try and go real vertical, it puts a bunch of tension in my forearm and everything gets tense and I can't get it to fire. So I'm gonna shoot a couple here, just backed up, and then I'll get real close to the camera so you can see. So I draw, and you'll hear the click on this. I anchor. And it goes off. Now, if you are, if that back tension is correct, that hand should come somewhere kind of back across the collarbone and end up behind you. If it comes out and away from your face or back like that, you're gonna have a lot of left-right misses because essentially it's gonna pull my bow arm one way or the other. The release needs to come pretty much straight away from that D loop. So I'm gonna get a little closer on this one. Oh, probably shouldn't have gone to the gym before this. Okay, so this will be a little more close up. So draw, anchor, build that back tension, start to relax, click, and the shot fires. So follow through, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself, we'll cover this in another video, but follow through is a reaction to proper shot execution, not a forced action. If I punch the release and then throw my hand, which you've probably seen those guys on the range where it goes boom like that, like this is just pure fluff. If I'm actually just pulling and that shot just breaks, that hand's just gonna come back a short ways. It's not gonna fly out here. That's just all extra. So let's look at that again. Get nice and close for you. Okay. So here, it's fairly tense. Now I'm gonna relax through it. It clicks. And the shot fires. So, I know there's gonna be a ton of questions on this. Like I said, this release has a click, so it warns me before it fires. You can get releases that have a click or no click option. You can get releases that you can control the amount of travel until the click as well as the amount of travel after the click. I don't like a ton of it because it's kind of funny, like when I coach people that have a release with a click, lots of times they can get on target and they can just aim like a rock and pull to the click. And as soon as it clicks, you just see this like, oh shit, look on their face. It's like, oh my God, it's about to fire. And they just completely freeze up and they stop the fluidity of it. So, when you're practicing, just don't be afraid to be fairly aggressive with it. It's gonna take some time. It's kind of an oxymoron shooting a hinge. It's like hold still while moving because this has to move in order to get it to fire. So try the methods I gave you earlier. If it's not working for you, try literally just, squeezing, like Dan McCarthy he starts just rolling that pinky back and poof, the shot fires. So give that a go. If you don't like it, don't blame me. No, it's gonna take time. It's not something, there's a few people that I've taught that pick it up right away and it's like they never look back, but it's gonna take some time. Any new thing does, you gotta form that muscle memory. So thank you guys for watching. Hit that comment button, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell if you haven't already. We really appreciate it. And as usual, remember precision is a decision. Keep them in the middle and I'll see you on the range.